Hey everyone, I'm Benjamin Dudai, the Spotlight Kid. Welcome to another episode of Album Explorations. Today, we're going to shine the spotlight on an absolute heavy metal classic from one of the most unique, original, and consistent artists in heavy metal. The one and only King Diamond, and the masterpiece that is Conspiracy. I know many people will cite Fatal Portrait, Abigail, or Them as their favorite. And even though I love those albums a lot, for me, Conspiracy is at the top. And that's saying a lot because King Diamond has never really made a bad album. So, Conspiracy, as many of you know, is the second part of the two-album concept started on the previous album, Them. On Conspiracy, King returns now as an adult to claim his right as heir to the House of Amon. However, he's still haunted by the unanswered questions about the death of his sister Missy. He also has to deal with his mother hooking up with his sinister therapist, who together are sort of conspiring to get rid of King so they can claim the house. King eventually ends up making a deal with Them, the invisible spirits from the previous album who are still present here. A deal that will give Them control of the house in exchange for being able to communicate with his dead sister from her grave at night. Even with this open communication, however, with Missy, she is still unable to warn King of the plot from his mother, his therapist, and eventually the local priest who is enlisted to help them. Inevitably, they seem to succeed in their plot, and King is murdered. However, the album does end with, I guess, the ghost of King promising to haunt them forever from beyond the grave. So, just a little bit about the band's history. King Diamond was formed in 1985. That's King Diamond, the band, after the first run of Merciful Fate came to an end. This was due to musical differences between King and guitarist Hank Sherman. However, King, Michael Denner, and bass player Timmy Hansen wanted to stay together, and they decided to use the name King Diamond for the new band because it was already known from the Merciful Fate fame and would help them, get better record deals and things like that. So joining them as the second guitarist was the mighty Andy LaRocque and the drum thunderhorse Mickey D. Mickey, who would also play with such heavyweights as Motorhead and Scorpions, of course. This lineup would record the first album, Fatal Portrait, great album. Then Abigail in 1987, the absolute classic. I'm repping the shirt there, as you can see. But unfortunately, following the release of Abigail, Michael Denner would leave the band due to the stress of touring and be replaced temporarily for the tour by Mike Moon. Timmy Hansen would also leave around this time, and guitarist Pete Black and bass player Hal Patino would join as full-time members. So this lineup would go on to release the first installment of this double concept album, Them, in 1988. Mickey D would leave the band officially after this period. However, he was convinced by the band to stay on as a session player for the next album, which was part 2 of the Them concept, released in 1989, the stellar album Conspiracy. And even though Mickey is listed as a session player, it doesn't sound phoned in or anything. His performance is just as killer as always. And that also goes for everyone else here too, of course. Andy and Pete kill on the guitars, just slay. Hal is solid as a rock, and King sounds really at his best, in my opinion. Anyway, so let's dive into Conspiracy. So track 1 opens up At the Gates. Opening with haunted house movie style keyboards, we find a now grown-up King lamenting the death of his sister Missy and trying to implore the spirits of Them to guide the two of them to each other in some way. The music goes into a sort of demented carnival melody then kicks in. Immediately, King shrieks away over tasty riffs, and again, it shifts gears and builds up again. The verse continues like this until it descends and lands on a double time section, and a blistering solo just rips through your speakers. Both Andy and Pete solo all over this album, and both are equally great here. Anyway, the verse returns and the story's pushed forward. The weird and wonderful vocals of King are all over the place, but totally melodic and catchy at the same time. The feel changes again, and a cool lead guitar passage sits on top and eventually gets back to the verse, but with King always adding variations. The only other singer I can think of who does weird sort of permutations in what seem like random ways, yet it makes it all work well, is David Bowie. I can remember listening to Bowie when I was much younger and sort of being amazed at how he would do that. It's a rare skill to do that and still remain cohesive and tuneful. So it changes feel again, and we get another shred fest, and it's fantastic. The guitars are just straight fire on this album. Anyway, the song ends with a cool sort of build up with a sort of keyboard tension there. Awesome song. Then we come to the amazing track 2, Sleepless Nights. So now King, unable to sleep, hears them at his sister's grave in his mind. He wants nothing more than to see Missy again, and here he makes the deal with them to see Missy in exchange for giving over once again control of the house. So the music starts off riffing hard and then sort of settles into a dreamy acoustic verse line to then fire up again. King moves through his sort of mid-range falsetto and sounds great doing it. His vocal harmonies are all over the place as usual in the chorus. The verse and chorus repeats and leads into a ripping shred guitar solo. And they really never skimp you, these guys. The solos always have plenty of meat on the bone. The solo moves into this mournful, epic instrumental passage and then back into the shred attack. The soft part of the verse sort of returns, but then is punctured by the voice of them, performed with a sort of vocal effect to lower King's voice in a demonic fashion. And it's so cool. Here them, offer King the terms of the deal. And when King agrees, the music lifts and soars in this epic, powerful melody. This whole section is one of my favourite parts in any King Diamond song. It always gets me so pumped. I love it. Anyway, the song returns to the verse feel again to sort of wrap up this just fantastic song. That brings us on to track 3, Lies. So we get a stomping opening riff, which then gets kind of rocking, some tasty dual harmony, adding spookiness to it. King is in a therapy session with Dr. Landau, who he hates. He wants out of these sessions, so he lies and tells the doc that he no longer believes in them and that his nightmares are all gone. This prompts the doctor to suggest it might be time to reunite with his mother. Of course, this is exactly what King wants all along, and hence the lies that all is good. But secretly, nothing has changed for him. I love the vitriol that King has for the doctor here. Like when he says, "My God, I hate his breath," and "that kind of fool deserves a lie." And also like when he says, "I should have taken his stethoscope and forced it down his throat." Clearly not a fan of his doctor. Anyway, we get another epic solo over a halftime feel to then return to the verse and onto another solo, but this time over the faster groove to wrap everything up. So then we get to track 4, A Visit from the Dead. Here King is dreaming happily about good times with Missy, to then awake to feel his bed moving in an eerie chill all around him. He realizes Missy is there in his bedroom and talking to him, trying to warn him of the plot against him. The music starts with some beautiful acoustic guitar grooves and King mournfully floating above it until eventually the distorted guitars sneak in and take over. The lead line is catchy and tasty, and the drumming is super cool. King shrieks his way through more catchy verses and choruses, and we get to the shred offensive, but without changing the feel, they charge forward through the song. Another solo and finish with the great catchy chorus and the promise from Missy to send King a dream to better illustrate to him the warning she's trying to give him. And that brings us along, of course, to the dream, which is track 5, the wedding dream. It's very cool how they take the opening notes of the classic wedding march, dun, 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 and they use that and then drag it down into King's demonic, evil-sounding territory for the verses. It sounds nightmarish, but also super melodic and catchy. And has a bit of a gothic vibe to it too. I don't think anyone else manages to sound evil and fun at the same time the way King does. So awesome. Anyway, so here in the dream that Missy has sent, King is confronted with the image of his mother getting married to the hated Dr. Landau, of all people. This makes King determined to stop it. So the song kicks up into high gear and moves through a few passages into the verse and builds to the chorus. It's a bit hard to tell sometimes with King's songs what's the verse and chorus. Anyway, the groove stomps out and the solo explodes its way in and over the field change and back again. Another chorus and another killing solo and back to the verse, and finally the moody intro section returns to close out this very cool song. That brings us along to track 6, Amon Belongs to Them. A great mid-paced groove kicks off with tasty dual leads above it, leading to the verse. King shrieks away about his mother arriving at the house, and he's prepared everything for her to make it as nice as possible. However, when he opens the door, he sees the dreaded Dr. Landau. He tells his mother that he cannot enter the house because now Amon belongs to them, and they won't allow it. So he also explains to her that Missy and them have been visiting him. Of course, King is unaware that Dr. Landau has handed his mother a syringe with some mystery contents. And, because of King's apparent madness and her own nefarious desires, she decides to use it on him. He, of course, doesn't see it coming, and the substance knocks him out. Of course, the song is rocking hard throughout, and we get more guitar fireworks. I love the main theme played with the dual leads and later the keys joining in. It's just super cool, super tasty. So that brings us to track 7, Something Weird. So this is a short instrumental. It starts with some doomy guitar harmonies, which lead into an almost classical vibe with a kind of reversed kind of guitar effect, I guess. This sort of short little musical interlude has a bit of a movie soundtrack vibe to it, and feels like, to me, it feels like a nice accompaniment to King falling into an unconscious nightmare state after the needle jab from his mother. That, of course, brings us to track 8, Victimized. So another instantly catchy riff to start the track, which moves into the verse. King passionately relates how he's been left on the floor unconscious while his mother and Dr. Landau go to the local priest to enlist him into their conspiracy to kill the helpless King. The priest is easily convinced by Dr. Landau that King is an irredeemable lunatic and most likely possessed by Satan himself, and agrees to join them to kill King. The music is again great, engaging throughout. The solo is again the epitome of cool, tasteful shred, and King delivers his performance with dread and foreboding as he tells us is being victimized again. We get a classical kind of harpsichord guitar section laced with doom from King's voice to finish the song. This is really the last actual normal song on the album. The rest is sort of basically musical theatre from here on in. And that, of course, brings us to track 9, Let It Be Done. So with these sort of sinister keyboards playing a kind of B horror movie soundtrack vibe underneath, we get the doctor and the priest discussing how the three of them will carry out the murder, which involves placing King's sleeping body into a coffin and then his mother and Dr. Landau lighting the coffin together to burn him alive. Simple, right? When that's completed, to then place whatever remains into his sister's grave. Charming. So Dr. Landau sounds all too happy about all of this as he chuckles to himself as he's confirming all of this to the priest. King Diamond, of course, plays it so well. It's super schlocky, but also really entertaining. There's just no one that does it like King Diamond. So finally we get to track 10, Cremation. So Cremation is basically just another instrumental track. When King Diamond would perform this live, King would actually get into a coffin on stage, and guys would come out and set it on fire, to close out his shows. Very cool. Anyway, the song is a rocker that definitely kicks along nicely with some moody, sinister keyboards thrown in to add that musical theatre vibe. I can really picture the poor unconscious King burning up to this track. It fits really nicely. So, just as it seems the conspirators will be victorious against King, we hear his ghost issue a final proclamation. He says, "Whenever the dark is near, I will return from the grave to haunt you, God-forsaken whore." So, that brings us to the end of this masterpiece from King Diamond. So how would I rate this album? Well, as I mentioned, this is my favourite King Diamond album, and I'm a huge fan of his stuff, so that should indicate it's going to be high. Do I think it's perfect? Well, even though it has some schlocky moments, and the last 2 tracks aren't even conventional songs, which would lower the score for some people, for me, I love every second of this album. I love the production, I love the schlockiness, I love the playing, especially the guitars at god tier level, and the drums kill as well. And of course, King himself sounds great throughout. He toned down his falsetto usage a touch from the previous album, which did get a little over the top there. Here, he still uses plenty, but we also get more of his fantastic mid-range power, and it really only serves to enhance the songs even more. So, with all that being said, yeah, for me, it's another perfect album, and I would unreservedly give it an easy 10 out of 10. So, if for any reason you haven't heard this album, go check it out, go listen to it on YouTube, go buy it, and you can thank me later. Okay guys, so that's it for today. Thanks for helping me shine the spotlight on this classic album. If you like the video, please subscribe, like the video, go check out the other album explorations I have on my channel. And so from me, the Spotlight Kid, keep it metal, and see you next time.